It wasn't an algorithm. You need to understand that first. The images and sounds you were shown, the cryptic numbers that appeared in your recommendations, that was a signal, a tuning fork resonating with something already inside of you. You were chosen because you are one of the few who senses that the reality we see is just a fraction of the whole story, a beautiful, hypnotic, but fragmented echo. For months, you've been collecting those echoes, feeling their power without understanding the source. Consider this video the first translation of that source. This is not another theory or a guess. This is the blueprint, the very architecture of the philosophy you've been subconsciously drawn to. What you are about to see is the key that elevates you from a mere spectator of the mystery to an active participant in its unfolding. The puzzle pieces are in your hands. Now, let's begin to assemble them.
Let us speak of unhappened worlds, of civilizations that never existed, yet whose unseen mark remains as a cognitive trace in our minds. There are ideas we have never formulated, yet they continue to act within us. They do not belong to our era, nor to our psychology. They have left no physical inscriptions, no crumbling ruins, no sunken temples, no skeletal remains or pottery fragments for archaeologists to classify. And yet, if you look closely at how you perceive the world, you will find structures, mental configurations, and strange folds in your awareness that seem born elsewhere. Unidentified fragments of a code that is not ours. Memories of something that never happened, which have somehow settled deep into our souls. Perhaps you have felt this yourself, in collective intuitions, recurring questions, or cultural phenomena that feel like remnants of worlds that never quite came to be. Traces of civilizations that never manifested in history, not because they were destroyed or forgotten, but because they simply never crossed the threshold into physical existence. They are blueprints of reality aborted just before the moment of coherence. And yet they remain present, like fingerprints left on glass that was never fogged by breath. Let us call them latent civilizations. To be clear, this is not a game of alternate histories or speculative scenarios. We are not playing with what might have happened if Alexander the Great had not died in Babylon, or if the Great Library of Alexandria had never burned. Those are merely imaginative detours starting from what is already happened. What interests us here are the forms that never emerged at all, possibilities that never reached historical coherence, yet somehow deposited themselves not in physical matter, but in the human mind, not in chronicles, but in thought. These are truly immemorial civilizations, not because they are ancient, but because they have never actually been remembered. There is a kind of memory that isn't tied to anything, neither to a historical event, nor to collective memory, nor to a recognizable symbol. And yet, one way or another, it manifests itself. It is a negative memory, as the French philosopher Gaston Bachelard might have said, one that registers not what has been, but what could have been. That is the memory we are searching for, the sediment of what never occurred, an echo without a source, a morphogenetic field entirely devoid of history. We might call it a hypothetical archaeology of the invisible. Some concepts seem too refined to have emerged from our linear cultural lineage, some symbols too universal, and some forms too perfect not to have originated somewhere else. What is the golden ratio if not a cosmic mistransmission, an equation left unfinished by someone who never spoke? Who drew the first mandala if there was no one there to see it? The truth is, we are filled with structures that do not belong to us. Not everything inhabiting thought is the product of our era. There are elements in our mental language that do not stem from experience, heritage, or biology. At times, they feel injected, at other times, awakened. But they are always prior, or rather anterior, to the timeline we call our own. It is as though cultural presences were hovering in suspension around us, waiting to incarnate, singularities of raw meaning seeking a host. These are not ghosts of the past, but drafts of the possible. After all, who says all civilizations must develop on the visible plane? Some stay at the surface, others dig downward. Still others move sideways, brushing our field of action without ever touching it. Perhaps they do not exist in another time or place, but in an entirely different logical state. Non-linear civilizations requiring neither territory nor duration, only a permeable mind in which to manifest. And here you are, just such a permeable mind. Maybe you have had dreams that did not feel like your own, not in content, for we all dream of floods and cities, but in structure and syntax, as if written in another grammar. These are languages never spoken, yet perfectly precise, containing undeciphered yet coherent symbols, and impossible architectures that refuse to dissolve in the light of waking. Perhaps these are artifacts left behind by civilizations that never existed, not in a chronological sense, but in an ontological one. Aborted not due to a lack of time, but to an excess of silence. Yet they remain highly performative. They never built anything in the physical world, yet they left indelible marks on our way of thinking. You call them inspiration, sudden ideas, or flashes of genius. But what if they are actually intrusions, semantic parasites from unrealized worlds? We are not alone in our universe, but I do not mean extraterrestrials or spirits. I mean unrealized cultural configurations, undeveloped models, and residual metaphysics, mythologies with no mythographers, and cosmologies that never had priests yet persist as pure, unadulterated forms. These are orphaned structures, yet they are vibrantly alive. Sometimes they emerge through art, dreams, or delirium. Sometimes they slip between the words as we speak, when we say, "I do not know where this idea came from." Even human thought can be haunted, not by the past, but by the specters of the never was. You might ask, how does an unborn civilization form? Perhaps like a shell never inhabited, layered slowly in emptiness, with architecture, rhythm, and inner logic, but hollow. Or perhaps like a thought no one thinks, yet which exists, fully formed and available, a semantic cloud suspended in the space of potential. Occasionally, this cloud is intercepted by a mind that misreads it as its own, though it is nothing of the sort. There are no conventional words for this, but we can build an inverse vocabulary, a glossary for what never occurred. In doing so, we learn to name the nameless, mapping the unsaid, following the hidden veins in marble without ever carving it. The collective human psyche is porous, therefore it absorbs, but at the same time it also evokes. It actively attracts what does not yet exist. Carl Jung might have called them forming archetypes, primordial images seeking a place to appear. Yet this is more than mere imagery. These are entire cultural systems that never were, but still left tracks behind. No culture is truly isolated, for even the unrealized ones interfere with our reality. How do we know this? We do not, but we feel it, in conceptual structures that arrive fully formed, in myths that feel pre-installed, and in distortions of meaning. We feel it when something feels uncannily familiar and you cannot say why, when a vision paralyzes you for no reason, or when an idea feels right, even though you cannot explain it. Perhaps in those moments, a mist world brushed against you. Perhaps an unborn civilization was simply passing by. So what remains of a civilization that never was? Not ruins, nor dead languages, nor rituals lost to time. What remains is a semantic imprint, a way of arranging things, a certain curvature in thought. It is an effect without a cause, an impact without an object, a way of thinking about reality or avoiding it, as if we had inherited something we cannot name. And maybe we should begin to search for them, not in deserts, but in the folds of our minds, not in artifacts, but in incisions, not in ashes, but in dreams. The archaeology of the future may no longer be the science of the past, but of the invisible, digging not through earth, but through cultural memory, no longer looking for traces, but for the shape of absences. Is a civilization that never came to be still a civilization? Or is it just a reflection, an illusion in the cognitive field? Or worse, is it the real foundation, and we are merely its shadow? In a sense, we are made of what never was. We are built from missed possibilities, unmade decisions, and aborted bifurcations. If this holds for the individual, why not for the species? We are the result not only of what happened, but of what hovered. Every culture is also a silent refusal. Every thought, an interference. Every visible form, the negative of those never seen. And listen closely now. Not everything that exists ever took place, and yet it has left its mark. There exist archives of the possible, speculative cartographies of unemerged worlds that do not preserve what happened, but what never did, and yet still exists. They store not events, but configurations of possibility. They collect not remains, but prefigurations. Made entirely of absences, they nevertheless have weight. They have no physical location, yet they open from time to time like rifts in our mental continuity, like sourceless epiphanies. We pass through them unaware, yet sometimes something slips through. A structure we have never seen but somehow recognize. A symbol without history, yet insistently, uncannily familiar. A logic not our own, yet already inside us. These are the archives of unborn worlds. Civilizations that never manifested have not vanished, they simply never appeared. But their lack of materiality does not imply an absence of influence. Some deposited themselves as residual frequencies, others as unrealized geometries, others still as phoneme-less languages. Their field is not time, but interference, not chronology, but the threshold. Have you ever felt a shape calling from behind perception? A concept unfounded yet persistent. An idea that did not originate from you, yet chose you as its vessel. This is not inspiration. This is a quiet infiltration. Some cognitive constructs seem too coherent to be accidental, too alien to be native, yet we understand them. Indeed, we await them as if written into our margins, as if we had already inhabited a world never built. And so we study them, imitate them, disguise them as art or philosophy, and embed them in stories. But perhaps they are more real than what surrounds us. An unborn civilization is not measured in centuries. It has no dynasties, no ruins. It has structure, coherence, and style. We might say it possesses an implicit aesthetics, an invisible grammar, yet active. Sometimes this grammar emerges as shared intuition, a transhistorical impulse, a form that arises in multiple minds at once, inexplicably. Sudden aesthetic waves, self-generating myths, untraceable symbols, all may be the side effects of open archives. There is a discipline we might call hypothetical archaeology of the possible. It does not dig through soil, but through concepts. It does not extract artifacts, but models. It does not pursue what happened, but what could have happened, and that, in mutated form, continues to unfold within us. Its maps are not geographic, but topological, describing semantic proximities, metaphysical adjacencies, and impossible contiguities. An unrealized civilization is not far. It is just out of phase, like a wave, not in sync. That is why we sometimes feel them approaching. In dreams with geometric structure, in languages never spoken yet immediately grasped, in mental architectures that are not ours but contain us. When that happens, thought bends. It deforms slightly and, in bending, reveals a shadow that should not be there. Perhaps that is where a world left its mark. Perhaps that is where something passed through. The idea of future memory, often dismissed as paradoxical, may be the effect of such presences. You do not recall what was, but what waits. A latent world has always inhabited you, and you recognize it not because you have seen it, but because it reminds you of something you did not know you knew. Some call this anemoia, nostalgia for a place never visited, maybe even non-existent. But is the nostalgia real? Or is the object that provokes it real, even when it's not there? Unborn civilizations work by induction. They do not impose, they do not announce, they seep. They alter internal structures quietly, leaving shapes, faint resonances, and nameless hyperobjects. They root in thought like hollow seeds, yet are filled with potential. Occasionally, someone makes them sprout, not fully, but enough to glimpse the outline. This is a non-linear culture, a field culture, a latent culture, living at the edge between perception and deduction. It never shows itself completely, but resides close. To access it, do not study, disalign. Remove the noise, let yourself be crossed by the nonsensical, and trust the logic of the impossible. Now ask, who would have lived in these civilizations? Not individuals, perhaps, nor beings as we conceive them, but constellations of thought, cognitive clusters, living structures unbound by biology. Or perhaps humans, yes, but guided by other archetypes, freed from the historical ballast that shaped us, with different instruments, different symmetries, different priorities. You do not need to believe they really existed. Just sense that they could have. That is enough to make them real now. Enough to trigger a perturbation. And if the perturbation is strong enough, it can modify systems, even ours. And perhaps, just perhaps, we are already one of those civilizations, not fully emerged, not fully manifest. A half-world, an ongoing project. And those we perceive as unrealized may be, in fact, our completed variants elsewhere, transversal resonances, interferences between divergent futures. It is as if we were all incomplete versions of something that surpasses us, yet brushes close when something vibrates out of scale. When you think, I do not know where this came from, but it is right, maybe you have just touched an archive of the possible. When you dream a language that does not exist but understand it, perhaps you are speaking from the edge. When you recognize a shape never drawn, yet know it belongs to you, maybe you are rebuilding the map of an unborn world. This is not out of nostalgia, nor out of faith, but because, deep down, it is still there, waiting. See you in the next episode.